Hi, welcome back. It's been a long time since I've made a video. Sorry about that. um, anyway, today I don't really remember when the last time I made a video like what I talked about, and I didn't feel like going back and looking. So I am going to quickly go through all the books that I've read so far for 2025. So if you want to hear about them quickly, stay tuned. Okay, so far I've got my iPad open up here, and it only has 5% left, so I forgot to charge it last night, so I'm gonna have to go quick. My goal every year, every year, for the last 2 years, well, last year and this year, my goal is to read 52 books. Last year I read like 123, 124, something like that. I probably will not make that many, but it's not really my goal to read 100 books. I just want a goal of one book a week. And it doesn't have to be one book a week, but in the end. So just to kind of keep me motivated to read more, which at this point, I shouldn't even really have a goal. And I'm rambling about something that's not important. Anyway, so my goal is 52. I have at this point read 45 books so far. That's not counting children. All the books I have to read to my children. But I have planned on making not a separate channel, but a separate series of videos over the books that I read my children, and recommendations and stuff. But again, it's been hard for me to film lately. I don't know why. We've been sick off and on this year a lot. So I could give every excuse in the book, but there's probably been moments that I could have filmed and I didn't. And I also forgot to put on lipstick. So it is what it is. You get what you get. Okay. The first book that I read for 2025 was The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. This was a book for the book club that I'm in, and I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was fine. But it just kind of, I'm not going to talk about it. If you want to read it, read it. The next book I read was most of the time, let me clarify, I read mainly audiobooks. I have 2 little children. I am homeschooling. I can't get my life together as it is. I don't have time to sit down and read a book. I'm also more than likely ADHD, and I cannot just sit and read a book. If I can sit and read a book, it's going to have to be a super short book, a graphic novel, or like something that just like really just grabs me, because my mind wanders and I will not finish a book. I also enjoy playing video games. I enjoy crocheting and those things. I can listen to a book while doing those things. So anyway, most of them are audiobooks. The Husbands, I already talked about that. The next book I read was They Called Us Enemy by George Takei, and this was a graphic novel. 5 out of 5. You should read this book. The next book I read was Anne of Avonlea. It's the second book in the Anna Green Gables saga, by L.M. Montgomery. 5 out of 5. Great book. I didn't like it quite as much as Anne of Avonlea. A lot was going on while I was listening to it, so my mind wasn't 100% into the book, but it still wasn't, to me, on the level as the first one. The first one's amazing. The next book I read was The Martian by Andy Weir. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it. I still have not seen the movie. So, yeah. The next book I read was, I'm trying to work through all of Hercule Poirot and the Miss Marple series by Agatha Christie. I want to get through those first. Those are my 2 favorite characters out of Agatha Christie. So I read The Body in the Library, It was a Miss Marple novel, and I'm not sure. It's one of the early ones because I just started this. So anyway, I gave it a 4 out of 5. Oh, I said 4.5 out of 5 stars. So it was good. Agatha Christie, I really enjoy her. She is amazing as far as like she made the mystery genre really. But it's rare to find one that I would rate a 5 star. I don't know why that is. It is. The next book I read was The Frozen River, based on someone's recommendation on YouTube, and I can't remember who the person was, or I would mention them. But this book is amazing. It is borderline nonfiction. It's based on this woman's diaries, but it's what's the word? Not elaborated, but it was dramatized. But it is based on a real woman and a real situation. The Frozen River, it is, I gave it 4.5 stars. I probably would have gone back and said a 5 star, but I think there was something that I didn't just love about it. The next book was a book club recommendation by me. So I got to run back book club that week, and it was Starter Villain by John Scalzi. Holy cow. This book, 5 out of 5. Everyone in the book club loved it. So, and we all have very different views on what we like as far as books. So this book, hilarious. If you like Austin Powers, even if you don't like Austin Powers, but that form of the campy villain story with the, you know, the cat and the underwater cave and throwing people into volcanoes and stuff, that like that kind of stuff, you just want some light humor. This book is so good. It should be a sitcom, to be honest. The next book was a book that we read as a family, and it was an audiobook that we listened to, but it was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl. It's the first in the Charlie Bucket series. I didn't realize there were more, so there you go. I had never listened to this book. I had watched the movies, you know, but I'd never seen, or I'd never read the book. And we loved it as a family, so 5 out of 5. The next one was the first Hercule Poirot book, The Mysterious Affair at Styles. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Sometimes I rate these half stars, and if I don't put it in my actual review on Goodreads, they only do full stars. So unless I wrote it at the beginning, I don't really remember. So I'll just go with the 5 solid stars. The next book I read, James by Percival Everett. Holy cow, another one you should read. So I'm in the 52 book club book challenge this year, as I was last year. It's what got me back into reading. So one or two of the prompts is read 2 books that are in a shared universe. So I read Percival Everett, and then later I read The Adventures of Huck Finn. So 5 out of 5. Percival Everett, this could be a great contender for my favorite book of the year. The next one I read was Live and Let Shy, the Seaside Cafe Mystery, book 1. I read by Bree Baker. I read this one upon my mom's recommendation. My mom and my sister and we kind of have a little mini book club between the 3 of us, and we read a lot of cozy mysteries. So we've read the Thursday Murder Club books together. We've read the Marlowe Murder Mystery books together, and I read this one. It was cute. I liked it. And I didn't think that I would want to read any more after this, but then the ending happened, and now I'm curious. I don't know if I'm going to read more, but I am intrigued to possibly read more. I gave it 4.5 out of 5. The next one was a physical graphic novel, The Complete Mouse graphic novel by Art Spiegelman. 5 out of 5 stars. Hard read. I mean, not difficult to read, but a difficult subject. It's about the Holocaust and family trauma and all that. Then I read the graphic novel of Fahrenheit 451. It was a reread, kind of a reread. I read for Fahrenheit 451 in high school, loved it, and so I wanted to read the graphic novel, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, so it's good. Wasn't as good as the book from what I remember from high school, which has been more than 20 years ago, so. The next book I read was Caught in the Revolution. It was a very interesting nonfiction book from multiple perspectives of journalists caught in Russia during the Russian Revolution. And while it was good, there were so many characters that I had a hard time keeping track of who, and this is nonfiction, it's based on true stories, you know. And it's very interesting, and I learned a lot, but I only gave it 3 stars because it wasn't great. The next book was another book club book. It was Wayward by Emily Hart. I believe this was also a suggestion of mine. I had a lot of suggestions this year for book club. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I liked it. I liked it a lot. The next book was another graphic novel, Brave New World. Again, I read Brave New World in high school and loved it. I reread it as a graphic novel. I gave it 3.5 stars. I may have said 4 stars. I gave it 3.5 stars. I actually wrote that one down. It was good. Not as good as the book I remember, but it did bring back a lot of stuff that I forgot. I also completely forgot how graphic sexually it is. And I mean, it's not really too much for high school, but I had forgotten. And especially in a graphic novel, I was like, oh, I don't think I realized that much when I was in high school. The next book I read was Cold Clay, a Shadow Hollow mystery. It's the second book in the Shadow Hollow mysteries. 5 out of 5. Great book. I cannot wait to read the next one, but it's got a long wait with my Libby, so, which is fine. I can wait. The next book I read, I don't know, I think I said, but 5 out of 5. The next book I read, the Cold Clay book is written by Juno Black, but Juno Black is actually 2 women. And they write under the pen names Juno Black. But anyway, okay. Murder on the Links, it's the second Hercule Poirot book. I gave it 4.5 stars. I actually really liked this one. I thought it kept me guessing, and I don't think I figured it out. Anyway, 4.5. Agatha Christie. The next book I read was Erasing History by Jason F. Stanley. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I think I really gave it a 4.5. Excuse me, maybe. I can't remember. It's very short. It was interesting, timely. I put that it was likely written too late in the game for Americans and authoritarianism taking over and fascism and all that. So it based what he is seeing as a historian from what he has taught over fascist governments in colleges over the years, and what he's seeing happening here. In fact, I'm pretty sure he has now moved to Canada because he is so nervous about what is happening here. The next book was Foster by Claire Keegan. This was an extremely short book, possibly on the short story side, maybe not. It was borderline. I read it in a day. I gave it 4.5 stars. It was great. I only took off half a star because I wasn't crazy about the ending. I wanted more. So that's good, I guess. I want more. Cried my head off though. Very good story though. The next book I read was Wool. It's the first book in the Silo saga by Hugh Howey. I started out watching the TV show with my husband, and I realized it was a book. So I was like, well, I'm going to read the books before we watch this. So I've read the first book, and 5 out of 5. Again, it could be a contender for a favorite book of the year. I feel like I've forgotten a lot more than I forgot from Percival Everett. So I think that Percival Everett has like affected me more than Wool did. Wool was more just like, ooh, cool entertainment, you know. The next book I read was the Regatta Mystery and Other Stories featuring Hercule Poirot, Miss Marple, and Mr. Parker Pyne by Agatha Christie. It was a collection of short stories. I gave it 4.5 out of 5. It was good. The next book I read was Constituent Service by John Scalzi. It is a short book. I read it in a day. And this has solidified that John Scalzi is a favorite author of mine. This story is like a cross between Parks and Rec and Men in Black. I mean, it's so good. It is so good. I highly recommend reading this book. The next book I read was the graphic novel of The Kite Runner. I've never seen The Kite Runner. I've never read the book Kite Runner. I don't care to now. This book, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It was a very intensely affecting book, but there is stuff in this book. You need to check the content warnings before reading this book. And as a graphic novel, it just made it so much worse. But with everything going on in the Middle East, this just added to my like heartache and soul crushing of everything. It puts a human face to what has happened over history. The next book I read was another John Scalzi book, and it's called The President's Brain is Missing. I think this may have been like just for Audible. I don't even think he's got a physical book for it. It is so funny. It's a kind of a short story. I read it in just a couple hours, or listened to it. The president goes swimming and keeps floating up to the top. He can't get his head underwater. And so he calls his doctor orders an MRI, and his brain is missing. So it just goes crazy from then. The next book I read was The Hiding Place. I had read parts of this as a kid. I had seen the movie as a kid. I didn't realize how much leading up to her incarceration there was to the book, so I was surprised by that. But 5 out of 5. Hard book, should be read by everyone. The next book was another book club book. It was Vera Wong's Guide to Snooping on a Dead Man it's the second book in the Vera Wong series. It was just released this year by Jesse Sutanto. The first book was great. This one was so much better. I mean, our book club, her first book was the first book that we read when we started book club. And so it was great to revisit with Vera Wong. But we had an Asian meal and a tea. It was so much fun, and it's a great book. This one is so much better than the first one. And we all agreed in our book club about it. The next book I read was another short book called On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Timothy Snyder. Again, just like the Jason Stanley, was it Jason Stanley? Yeah, Jason Stanley Erasing History. He has, because of what he is seeing and has experienced as a historian, he has gotten nervous and has moved to Canada, moved out of America and moved to Canada. The next book I read was The Scarlet Letter. I both read the physical copy along with the audiobook. I started out the physical copy, got several chapters in, and then flipped to the audiobook because I didn't have time anymore. Such a good book. It was one of the few books from high school that I enjoyed. The next book I read was Rogue Squadron. It's this first book in the Star Wars X-Wing books. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It was good. We had, I read it right after we had just come back from Disneyland and enjoyed Galaxy's Edge and everything, and we were watching Andor at the same time, and it was just, you know, a nice immersive. The next book we read was for book club, or I read, was for book club. It was Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing by Matthew Perry. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It was hard. It was a hard book to listen to. Just so sad. Such a sad book. The next book I read was To Kill a Mockingbird. I had actually never read it in high school. I think I came to the new school right after they had read it. There was some stuff in there that I didn't realize was as hard as it was, but 5 out of 5. Great book. Fantastic. The next book I read was the 4th Miss Marple book, The Moving Finger. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I don't really know why they called it The Moving Finger. I don't know. I don't even remember the story, so I didn't care too much for it. The next book I read was a very short book called Thornhedge. It's my first T. Kingfisher book, and if the rest of his books are like this book, he might be a favorite. This was a retelling of like a fairy tale idea, kind of like Sleeping Beauty, but from a different perspective. It wasn't really Sleeping Beauty, but it kind of had that. There is a princess asleep up in the castle, and this fairy is guarding to make sure no one wakes her up because she's horrifying. Anyway, very good book. The next one was Res Dogs. It was a sweet story about this family during lockdown, during the COVID pandemic. And the ironic thing is, a couple of days later, my family ended up with COVID. It was crazy. Anyway, the next book I read, I think I gave it a 5 out of 5. The next book I read was Sweet Bean Paste by Jurian Tsukugawa. I probably didn't say that right, but Tsukugawa. 4 out of 5 stars. It was a sweet story. It was good. It was good. I learned a lot about Hansen's disease, or what we used to call leprosy. That was very interesting. The next book I read was A Man Called Uwe by Frederick Backman. My mom had read this a couple years ago and said, you need to read this book. It's basically your dad. It is. My dad passed away a couple of years ago, and reading this was just, it had me laughing out loud because it just sounded so much like my dad. But Frederick Backman, a favorite author of mine, and probably most of the world who has read him. This is my second book I've read by him, and I'm going to say he's one of my favorites. The next book we read was a book club book that, upon my recommendation again. Anyway, it was called Nosy Neighbors by Freya Sampson. She has another book that just came out that I love the title of it too, and I really want to read it. But I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. Most of the people in the book club did not care much for it. They thought it was fine, but they didn't like it. I really liked it. And I totally plan on reading the new book. But we all agreed it should not have been titled Nosy Neighbors. It has nothing to do with that. The next book I read was The Adventures of Huck Finn. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Really enjoyed it. I had never read it. We were supposed to read it in high school, and I think I read parts of it, but it was very good. And definitely should read James. Very close together. The next book I read was the third Hercule Poirot book, and Poirot Investigates. They were short stories, and like a lot of books written back in that time period, there are some references to minorities that are a little jarring. Same with the Huckleberry Finn, and other books written in the past. The way minorities were treated, the names they were called, it's horrible. at the same time, we can acknowledge that that was terrible and inhumane and dehumanizing and just a plethora of other horrifying things. But at the same time, we can also appreciate the literature for what it stood at that time. For example, Huckleberry Finn, it hurts to read that. Like, it hurts to hear people talk about Black people in that way. But when Mark Twain wrote it, it was a controversial book and took several years to come out because it was such a anti-slavery book. The next book I read, we're getting close to being done. The next book I read was The Cuban Heiress by Chanel Clayton. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it surprised me that I liked it as much as I did. I do not like thrillers. This one is a historical fiction based on a real shipwreck and everything. And I had no idea. I didn't even know until the end that it was based on a real ship. But I'm not a fan of thrillers, and there's a thriller element to this book, and I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed this one. It surprised me. The next one is the book club. We're going to talk about it at our next book club. I did not pick this book. It's called One Golden Summer. Apparently it's the second book in the Barry's Bay series by Carly Fortune. Hold on. I gave this 2.5 stars. I kind of considered giving it 3 stars, but I'm like, no, I didn't like it enough for 3 stars. So I do not like romances. I especially do not like the graphic romance novel stuff. And while this story was pretty good, it could have been, if the book was half as long as it was, it still would have been too long, in my opinion. It was too long of a book. Much, much too long of a book. Halfway through, I was like, we're about to wrap this up, right? And then I looked and saw that we weren't even halfway through, and I was like, you have got to be kidding me. So, anyway, just not my thing. The next book I read was Everything is Tuberculosis, A History and Persistence of Our Deadliest Infection by John Green. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed the book. I enjoyed hearing about the science and the political stuff surrounding science, and I like that kind of stuff, so not many people do, but I enjoyed it. The only thing I didn't like is that I agree with like everything that he's saying, but I'm like, but how do we change it? Like, what do we do other than voting for a different people? How does me, or how do I, as nobody special, nobody with power, how do I help make changes? So I wish he'd kind of given some ideas of proactive things that we could do. The most recent book that I have read is Wigfield, The Can-Do Town That Just May Not, by Amy Sedaris, Paul Dinello, and Stephen Colbert. And Stephen Colbert does the audio side of it. Amy Sedaris pops in. I think the Paul guy, he pops in some too, I think. But Stephen Colbert, holy cow, that man is so talented and hilarious. Anyway, he does voices great. It was a short book. It was only 4 hours and 45 minutes, I think, something like that. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. My husband finished it yesterday, and he enjoyed it. He didn't enjoy it as much as I did, but I laughed my head off. So funny. So I am currently reading, I chose a long book, and the book is good. I'm enjoying it, but because it is like over 20 hours long, I keep getting, I guess, intimidated by that, and I should just enjoy it. And I am enjoying the book. It's just, sometimes I'm like, ugh, do I have to read that? I don't really feel like that. I'm like, is it going to move fast enough? And I gotta tell you, like when I'm reading it, I'm like, this is so good. And I keep wanting to tell my husband, you gotta read this book. What is it? It is, it's called The Will of the Many. I don't remember who wrote it, but it is very interesting. And I cannot wait to figure out what the heck is going on in this book. I'm not very far along in it, but it's good so far. I'm also reading in our family read aloud. We are reading The Adventures of Podkin One Ear. We are almost done with it. We've got maybe 2 more reading sessions left, and it's really good. It is really good. It's probably a little over my 5-year-old's head, but I'm enjoying the heck out of it. So eventually we will finish it and then we'll start another one. So anyway, thank you for listening. I will probably make another video eventually.